welcome to Intuitive Living. I'm your host, Silvia Sisson, and in today's episode, I have a guest via Zoom, the fabulous Jessica Cooper. She's an herbalist located again in Utah. We're going to have a chat about herbalism, what exactly is herbalism, how she got into herbalism. And we're going to chat a little bit about her passion. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's really fun to be sitting here virtually, I guess I should say, together. I know we've kind of known each other on and off for years now. So
yes.
And for everyone who is tuning in, I'm actually originally from Rhode Island, where Sylvia's based, but now, as she mentioned, based in Utah. So big change to the mountains, but it's fun to be connecting with our local host here.
Yes, it's awesome. Yes, we go way back. I think you actually came into my life as a client.
Yes.
When I just started off. That was like almost 14 years ago.
Probably about that, yep.
Right, on and off.
Back in my early 20s, searching for some answers.
I know. Yep. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into herbalism? What made you go into herbalism?
Yeah. So really, when I kind of reflect on my whole life back to childhood and everything, I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time, but my mom was very much grounded in being as close to nature as possible. So we picked from a garden for dinner salads. She had these old VCR yoga tapes, right? So all that stuff that kind of is really trendy now or has been recently was just normal to me. And I took that for granted. I think in my 20s, I spent, my first decade of my career in a really demanding consulting job, lots of travel. And I hit a point where I just wanted to carve out more time for just some of that more soft living and health related activities. So, that led me to yoga teacher training, and that wasn't really enough. I wanted something more prescriptive. I like to dive into data and details and stories. And around that time, I had kind of my first, I'd say, more severe health situation. I kind of had burnt myself out, and my personal sort of core compositional weakness is getting psoriasis, which I didn't know until this time. And so I'm probably 30-ish years old, covered truly from head to toe in some gnarly looking psoriasis, which is a genetic disposition to the skin sort of autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
So all the doctors were telling me, go to light therapy, take essentially immune suppressants, which are really tough on the body. There's nothing you can do. You have it now for the rest of your life. And that wasn't enough for me, to being research minded. And I knew there was a way that I could create some more revert back to balance in my body, and that this would go away, that you're not a victim of your genes. They can just be expressed if you allow certain situations to take hold, right? And so that's when I found herbal medicine, and I worked with this incredible guy out of Canada who took me via Zoom because he specialized in skin conditions. Long story short, we were able to heal it entirely. It's never come back, and that's when I went off to get my certification.
Very cool. Very awesome. So I firmly believe everything hangs together, right? It comes to like any kind of conditions we have, it's mental, physical, spiritual, and it has to be looked at as a whole and not necessarily just on one side, medicine or emotional or, everything combined. So I'm so happy you actually found that to cure whatever was going on in your life. How does herbalism work?
Good question. So it is kind of a loaded word, right? Everyone might hear it, you might think of tea as herbalism, but it does have a really long history, but at its core, it's just the practice of, we could say, medicinal or therapeutic, so intentional use of plants, and specifically herbs in this case. So what that means in my practice, or if you see an herbalist, really we're using plants or herbs in this case to bring the body out of extremes and into balance where it can then heal itself. So instead of, say, just as a strong comparison to more Western pharmaceuticals, right, we're using kind of really potent um, intense directional messengers being pharmaceuticals to the body that leave kind of a wave of destruction. Yes, they work in a lot of ways, but they also leave some sort of a residue of other symptoms or just imbalance that might even be further kind of exacerbated through that.
Right.
So with herbs, we're kind of just looking to heal the body in just as much of a successful way, but by bringing it out of the extremes that it's in um, that led to that, array of symptoms somebody's having or disease. So, depending on the person's symptoms, their composition, I mentioned my composition is prone to psoriasis, for example. Like you mentioned, their lifestyle, what's going on in their life emotionally. That actual herbal protocol looks different in terms of what they're taking. But the point is, we're healing an imbalance that we discover in this kind of intake process. And that imbalance creates those disease or symptoms of disease. So, and you kind of already alluded to this, but the reason that herbs are so impactful in this way is the body recognizes them fully and knows how to use them because they're a whole organism, and can really, the body can respond super well to them and bring the body back into balance where it can thrive again.
Right. Would you say, so if you compare like the Western and the Eastern medicine with like pharmaceuticals and then herbalism, that like the pharmaceuticals, they might work immediately and you feel kind of like an immediate relief, but because we go back to like that original state, the herbalism is like going back into like that core energy that it might take a little bit longer before you see any kind of changes, but it's gonna, it kind of, took care of the root of the cause versus just as a Band-Aid. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%. That's a perfect summary. And I think that's a really great point because I find myself, and I don't know how I didn't remember to bring it up here, but I find myself having to bring that up in my first or second session with all of my clients, just to kind of set expectations around that, right? Especially in America, which I know you're not from originally, but we have this need for immediate gratification in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, yes.
And so kind of just setting that expectation that, you're looking at this for a reason, maybe other things haven't worked, maybe you don't want to continue to stress the body with certain ways of healing modalities that we're comfortable with in the US. And this might be a new approach for you, but it's been tried and true for thousands of years. So let's give it a shot and be patient. So what I like to tell people is for every year that they've been having symptoms or that symptoms have been building in their body, it takes 1 month at least, maybe 2 months, depending on how severe, of a daily herbal protocol to reverse that wave of symptoms becoming a habit in the body, to reverse that habit and go back to neutral or stasis, where those symptoms no longer arise. So really, that's kind of incredible that a year of stress and new ways of operating can be reversed with herbs in just about a month.
Right. Right. Now,
I think it's pretty fast.
I think it's pretty fast. I think, yeah, it's like, if you have like the situation where you want to lose weight, right? So to gain weight, it's like super quick. Within a week, you can gain like 10 pounds. But taking that off, it takes months to get back into that original state. And I would say it's probably similar to working with herbal medicine because you gotta go back to the basic and kind of like give yourself patience and kind of get used to getting back to that core, what you want to work with at that moment, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Now, what kind of health concerns can herbs treat?
So I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but really the list is super long. So if you think, everything from, say, something a lot of people experience at least a few times, indigestion, right? So it can be super successful with something like symptoms related to GI related issues, all the way to more severe disease. So I don't personally work in this space, but the cancer space is becoming more and more comfortable with utilizing herbs to support certain treatments, which have incredible results. So really any ailment can benefit from a at least thoughtful and precise herbal protocol. But really the way I like to think about it is in systems and symptoms. So each system in the body has certain symptoms that correspond with it when they are not in balance.
Right.
And so that's kind of part of that intake process where we're trying to discover what that core issue is to heal that core foundational problem
Right.
or imbalance. So, we know the main symptoms are, let's see if I can think of them all, but the endocrine system, the lymphatic system, digestion and elimination, the nervous system, cardiovascular, then there's musculoskeletal with all of our ligaments and fascia and actual muscles,
Right.
respiratory, right? So I might have left one out, but the point is the body organizes itself in a genius way. And we can recognize our uncomfortable symptoms and use that as information to put together that herbal protocol and get the body back to balance where it thrives again and works as that perfectly genius organism that doesn't need us to be thinking about how it's operating.
I like that. I like that a lot.
But I guess sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. What conditions do you focus on? You said there's certain things you don't focus on, and I want to see if you can explain that to our viewers, like what's your specialty?
Absolutely. So I focus on, so first, I guess I'll just take a quick step back and just explain a little bit about, so people probably are familiar with the terms chronic versus acute, but really, when we're going through an intake process and I'm understanding someone's symptoms, how long they've been experiencing them, trying to identify which systems of the body are out of balance based on that, right? We also want to understand if it's acute or chronic within that context. So we want to know, which symptoms came first. What is that core compositional weakness? What are their habits or lifestyle? What's going on? Get a big picture of that person as much as they'll allow. And if it's acute, this is typically simple, and it's not an area I usually see clients for. Acute conditions have a clear beginning and a clear ending, and they are usually a few days to a few weeks, but always less than 3 months of symptoms. So for that, herbal medicine works really well. We would use frequent repetitive doses to clear this up. So just as an example, you have a cough, you would take, depending on the type of cough, either a decongestant or an emulsant, and you would take something like a tea or a tincture up to 5 times a day for, say, 5 to 7 days, and it would most likely clear up. You wouldn't have continued symptoms or an evolution of that cough because you did an herbal treatment. So that's a really cool way to use herbs, but I focus on chronic conditions to your question. So I really focus on things that have been brewing in some way for longer than 3 months.
Okay.
So this is where it kind of gets interesting though, because most people would consider a lot of things that they might think that are acute that are actually chronic. So for example, every time the immune system's down, they get a sinus infection.
Yep.
This seems acute because the infection begins and ends, but it's actually chronic because it's that sort of compositional weakness we've been talking about, which we all have one, and it pops up when the immune system is off a little bit.
Okay.
So for that, we would dose them with a daily formula of different herbs, and when they're actually sick, they would also take a more frequent dose back to that kind of acute situation. So, really, I'm putting together an herbal protocol for a chronic condition for all of my patients. And this formula is kind of the art and the science. There's hundreds of herbs. Some are more potent than others. Some are more supportive than others or more nutritive. Some are more astringent. Some are really helping to pull toxins out and eliminate them, right? So we put together a formula for that particular person to put them back into balance. So maybe for them, they need more astringents, more detoxifications. Someone else, maybe for a feminine issue, they typically need more nourishing, nutritive, right, to bring the body back to balance. So the point, I guess, is the formula can look millions of ways depending on their situation. And we also continue to evaluate it as they go through their protocol. So in the beginning, we check in weekly. After a month, we check in monthly. Maybe it needs adjustment. We send out a new batch, stuff like that. So it's kind of an exciting process. You really get to know somebody, and like I said, as much as they're willing to share with you, but the clients I do tend to really focus on in terms of condition areas that tend to find me are typically women's issues and digestive issues. These tend to be super common today for lots of different reasons, but
Absolutely.
that could look like, endometriosis, hormonal imbalances, mood disorders, and then, you go into the digestive system, which can be really difficult for
Super
people to live their daily
complicated
life like
sometimes.
that. So
Yes, extremely complicated comes to the digestive system, I would say. You never know what,
yeah.
you know. I have a question in regards to the herbs. So we just kind of like generalize the word herbs. What does that entitle? Is it like mushroom teas?
Yeah.
Maybe if you can just explain to the viewers a little bit what you're working with on a
Yep.
on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So great question. So we consider herbs having 3 different classes. So class 1 is going to be your super safe. You can go into, say, your local grocery store, pick a tea off the shelf, could pretty much take that every day and have most cases have no repercussions for taking, say, the wrong tea or herb for your system, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
that's class 1. That's going to be your chamomile, your adaptogens. So those are going to be kind of, to your point, your mushrooms that are super safe.
Right.
So adaptogens are really just a class of non-toxic plants that naturally regulate your system. They adapt to your system depending on what you need. So super intelligent, can't really go wrong there. So those are all class 1. So say chamomile, ashwagandha, turkey tail, mint, even basil, right? Things that you think of as a food maybe source.
Would you say like lavender? I'm sorry. Would you say like lavender and lemon too, because they are like adaptable? I know from like aromatherapy, they are adaptogenics for like oils, right? They adapt to your body's needs at that moment, right?
Absolutely.
So anything like, kind of cool.
Yeah, so lavender, lemon, those are great examples that would be considered kind of that person who doesn't necessarily have a deep knowledge of this space can use them without doing any harm.
Okay.
It's very rare that those are included in a herbal formula of multiple herbs that help to shift a body from a state that it's in into a new state. So class 1, safe, helpful, but aren't going to move the needle in a dramatic way if you're in a disease state or leading towards something like that, right? So then there's class 2. These are herbs that I work a lot with. These are, I'd say 99% of the formulas I put together. Typically, you're not going to have ever maybe heard of them. They're not going to be in your grocery store. But at the same time, they have been used for thousands of years. They're all, we call them Western herbs. They've been founded within our world here. So there's, for example, everyone knows ginseng. That's typically found in Asia. There's American ginseng. So there's a version of that here that we would use in our formulas. And ginseng is considered class 2. It can be overused if it's something that isn't being used under the eye of an herbalist. And to the point here, these are herbs that are moving that needle, right? So if I were to just take a random formula of all class 2 herbs that might be meant for somebody totally different than the way that I operate, it could push me into a state of having symptoms that I don't want, right? Towards a state of dis-ease or disease.
Right.
And then there's class 3, which I pretty much don't work with. I said 99% are in class 2, but class 3 are going to be some of those herbs that are utilized for really severe states, such as, late stage cancer. So one of those is called poke root. This one, you would never even really find at an herbal store. That's going to be something that's really hard to find, get your hands on. You have to go through some hoops and paperwork to find that one.
Right.
And that one, it does work. It's successful. There's actually some clinical trials that have been done around it. Not clinical trials, case studies. And, it's just really interesting that at the end of the day, we have something for every ailment that's just found in nature.
Love that.
And all of the herbs I work with are Western. There are an Eastern equivalent to all of those, which those who practice traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture work with that set of herbs. But here we have our own equivalents to all of them. It's just, I like the idea of using something that's more familiar to the DNA of the body, which I'm Western, so.
Yeah, love that. Now, if somebody would be interested in picking up herbalism, what would you give them as an advice? Where would they go and actually find some more information or get in touch with anyone that teaches herbalism?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
So I wish there were more public resources. That's maybe something I could put on my plate, but I think a great place to dip your toe in and just get started would be with that group of herbs I mentioned, adaptogens. So they are super safe. You can't mess them up. You can't take the wrong thing. They truly adapt to regulate the body and bring it back into balance wherever it's out of balance. I mean,
Yep.
it's kind of magical. And each one has different healing properties. I mentioned turkey tail. I just love that one. It's known for doing a lot of things that we kind of need in today's world, removing toxins, increasing energy, even kind of removing excess fluid, strengthening the organs, right? Incredible stuff. So if you wanted to sort of add an herb into your daily repertoire to kind of dip your toe in, that's one I would really recommend.
Right.
In terms of where to go for resources, so there's the Herbal Academy, which is interesting because it's all online. I haven't taken their courses, but I've looked at all of them. And they have sort of the beginner. So if you want to be like a weekend herbalist where you maybe brew some teas or formulas on the weekend, they have a course dedicated to that. They have endless resources that are free within a blog format. And then they also have, more of an advanced where you actually get an herbal certification class. So everything from that weekend herbalist all the way through to if you want to be a practitioner.
Right.
I personally went when I was living in New York to the Open Center, which has two incredible herbal teachers. Unfortunately, they're no longer teaching. They're just going back into their private practice. I think COVID just kind of shut down the class for 2 years and they're not going back there. But Pika Trenkle has a huge part in my heart. She's incredible. She's based in New Jersey. She's a homeopathic practitioner as well as an herbalist, and I think she's been practicing for like 55 years. So
Oh, wow.
she is a wealth of knowledge. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's a pro. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. If you would be up to, like, if you feel comfortable, any advice with the season changes for our viewers, what to maybe incorporate into their daily rituals?
Yeah. So we're heading into a season where so we call it external wind from a herbal perspective, where it's like truly the weather outside can create disharmony in the body when cold is entering the body in ways that maybe you haven't experienced in 4 or 5, 6 months, right? So what we want to do as the season changes is really just provide the immune system with extra support and also provide the lung system, the respiratory system with extra support for removing some of those pathogens that we might get exposed to with those new winds coming in, right? I actually have one of these over here because we live in Utah and the air quality here is terrible this time of year. It kind of gets trapped in the valley. And I actually give this to my daughter too. It's a tincture, but it's not based in alcohol, so she can have it.
Oh wow.
But this is, oops, I have my little fake background here. So this is what a tincture bottle looks like. It can be smaller as well. This is a big size. But really, I just take this a few times a day. It's mullein. And mullein leaf is incredible for removing toxins and buildup in the lungs. So you can just take as much as I just had in there. Once a day. They have them alcohol-based or glycerin-based. This is glycerin. And it actually tastes pretty good. It's like earthy and sweet. But if you added something like this into your daily repertoire, you can just put it in your tongue, put it in your water if you like to dilute it and drink it throughout the day. What that does is it's really supporting the system to not get what we call the repercussions of cold and flu season, which really is just your immune system being not as robust and able to respond to the same things you're exposed to all year long.
Love that.
And so I would say, yes, for the season changes, mullein, And then getting back to some of those adaptogens to keep the immune system strong. Take your turkey tail every day, maybe get into ashwagandha, chaga, even for those who are averse to kind of the herby tastes, cacao is a really good one, just pure cacao. It's not chocolate, it's actually can be considered having herbal properties, which are really healthy.
Right.
But yeah, with the season changes, we want to just keep all of those icky things at bay by trusting our system to do what it can do and just supporting it.
Right. Love that. Now, if the viewers want to get in contact with you, do you have a website, any contact information?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website where we would kind of kick off our conversation. And so that is mymuru.com. It's mymuru.com. And the intention there behind the naming is I want people to be empowered to kind of be their own guru, their own modality guru or health modalities, like herbalism. And I do that by, of course, coaching them through protocols and hopefully healing the symptoms that they're experiencing, but also teaching them along the way, right? So to become your own health guru is kind of the idea behind the naming. But if you go to that website, you'll be prompted to take a free intake, which is about 5-minute quiz where we go through all the symptoms you're experiencing. It's just a starting point. I use that as a guide in our conversation to kind of expedite that intake process, already understand some of what you're experiencing, dive deeper there, go through your history and get started in an assessment if that's something that somebody wants to go through.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Now, just for fun, do you have any plans for your business? Anything for the future you want to do?
Good question. I do. I have a lot of ideas, but I think my favorite is, so I really, really love diving deep with my clients and going on this journey with them. But as I've been in practice for over 5 years now, I've seen kind of a lot of the same ailments coming through the door. Of course, everyone is unique and they experience them slightly differently, but some of those women's issues, some of those GI issues, even endocrine issues, kind of like that skin issues, unexplained weight gain, stress, being in fight or flight so often. And a lot of these, depending on the situation, a lot of these issues can have very similar formulas time over time, right? And so what I'd love to do is to build another section of my business where you go through more of a robust decision tree to kind of be prescribed a formula right at the end. So there's this automated intake process where maybe they're not connecting directly with me, but we're flagging them as somebody who doesn't have any peripheral situations to look at, and this formula would be safe for them. They can go ahead and just order it right there, and I could really scale the number of people that I can help through that. And then for those who are not appropriate for that, we'd continue to go through the process that I'm already going through with them. But what I'd love to do is be able to help more people. You can only have so much. You can only be so many places as one person, and so that's an idea that I'm working through.
I know. It's hard sometimes when you're one woman company, right?
Yeah.
Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me and being on my show. I hope we can have you back sometime soon, and maybe you can do some demonstration in how to make a tincture or any kind of teas. I would love to have you back.
A pleasure kind of reconnecting with you in this new way, and we should do some maybe fall or winter kitchen experiments together on here.
I will love that. We'll love that. Thank you, Jessica, once more. Until next time. And this was Intuitive Living with Silvia Sisson. If you want to get more information about my services, feel free to visit my website at silviasisson.com. Thank you for watching. Until next time.